Hello, my friends. Today, I want to start right away by saying that Russia continues to show they are not willing to make any concessions despite all the public statements. Lavrov said that Crimea is Russian and it's not even up for discussion.
Crimea is not even up for discussion right now. Yes, because it's a settled issue.
You mean that Russia occupies, controls, and won't negotiate over Crimea's future?
Russia does not negotiate over its own territory.
Then a journalist asked him what concessions is Russia even willing to make then.
You explained a lot, but from what you said, I can't conclude that Russia is ready to make any concessions on anything at the moment.
Well, briefly, I can only tell you that your conclusions are wrong. Just a second, please. I have repeatedly emphasized regarding Ukraine, regarding strategic relations with the US, that we are ready to seek a balance of interests. But if your network doesn't see that as a willingness to negotiate, then I don't even know what rhetorical skills I still need to use.
In short, they say they're willing to make concessions, but what exactly those would be, nobody really knows. After their conversation with Lavrov, only one thing became clear: Russia wants guarantees. And if a ceasefire happens, then during the time there must be no weapons deliveries to Ukraine.
The guarantees I talked about were violated, and they were violated with the strong support of European capitals and the Biden administration. If you want a ceasefire, but at the same time weapons continue flowing into Ukraine, then what's the point? Remember, Callas or Mark Rutte, I think, talked about a ceasefire too.
Yes, you're talking about the NATO Secretary General and the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs.
They supported any deal that would eventually allow Ukraine to grow stronger and win. If that's the goal of the ceasefire, I don't think that's what President Trump wishes. That's just how Europeans and Ukraine want to twist Trump's initiative.
Friends, be sure to leave your thoughts about all this in the comments. And now, let's move on to the situation on the front line, starting with the border. Here, Russian forces are continuing clearing operations in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, the Russians are already claiming that the Ukrainian forces, which recently retreated from the Kursk area, are preparing to launch a new attack on Russian territory elsewhere. It looks like they are trying to prepare the Russian public for the idea that they'll have to launch a counteroffensive and possibly enter Ukraine's Sumy region to create a so-called buffer zone. Overall, the situation along the border remains extremely tense. Russian military bloggers are now claiming they've broken through Ukrainian defenses and entered Sumy region near the village of Oleshnya. So, where is where is Oleshnya? So which they had just retaken a few days ago. The Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed this information yet, so for now we wait. If confirmed, the Russian advance would be about 800 meters. On the other hand, Ukraine's armed forces have released videos showing them destroying Russian troops near the village of Lakhnya, another clear sign that Russians are indeed pushing into Sumy region. This means we can already start talking about the beginning of the Sumy operation. Meanwhile, around Hornal, Ukrainian forces continue to hold the line across open fields. However, in the past 24 hours, Russian forces claim to have advanced another 1 kilometer 200 meters, and for now, that area remains a gray zone. Overall, the movement continues, and it looks like this whole front will soon officially be considered the Sumy direction. In the Belgorod region, shelling of the Sumy region continues, but no new clashes have been recorded so far. In the Kharkiv direction, things are relatively calm. For now, no new assaults are being reported, and in the Vovchansk area, offensive actions haven't been carried out for the third day in a row. Over the past 24 hours, the front line has remained unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, soldiers on the ground continue to report heavy shelling. However, the Russians are not launching new assaults, and for now, the situation remains stable. In the Borova area, the Russians are attacking Boguslavka, Nova Krugliakivka, and trying to break through near Raigorodka. Additionally, FAB strikes were reported in the Senkova area. The Russians are trying to destroy Ukrainian positions in the forested areas, but over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes along the front line. In the Liman direction, the Russians are assaulting the village of Nove and trying to break through near Novomykhailivka and Grekivka. However, there have been no new changes so far, although activity remains quite high. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are pushing toward Serebryanka and assaulting Belogorivka and Verkhnyokamensky. Shelling continues and has even intensified. Geolocated maps now show a large number of video confirmations of new strikes on frontline areas. It's clear they're trying to push Ukrainian forces back to at least the first line of defense. However, despite the heavy shelling, they have failed to advance, and the Ukrainian forces are holding the line. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the Russians have also increased their activity. They're trying to push into the central part of the city, assaulting Stupochki, Pritechene, and Bilagora, and advancing near Kurdyumivka. Shelling of Kostantinivka also continues, but so far they have made no progress and the front line remains unchanged for the past day. In the Toretsk direction, the Russians are assaulting Leonidivka, trying to break through in Toretsk, fighting around Krymska, and storming Deliivka. Through the south, there has been heavy shelling, but again, no new gains, and the front line hasn't shifted over the past day. In the Pokrovsk direction, attacks continue on Udachne, Lysivka, Promень village, and Yelizavetivka. Meanwhile, there is good news from Tarasivka. A few days ago, the Russians claimed they had captured Tarasivka, but today they corrected themselves, admitting that part of the village remains under the control of the Ukrainian forces. Overall, the maps reflects the situation accurately. Tarasivka is still controlled by Ukraine. Daily assaults on the village continue, but despite the heavy attacks, the situation remains relatively stable, and the Russians haven't made any advances. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians are assaulting Rozliv and conducting shelling. For now, they are preparing for new offensives, pulling up reserves, and carrying out artillery preparation of the territory. There have been no changes on the front line over the past day. In the area of Velika Novosilka, battles for Dnipro Energia continue. It seems that the Ukrainian forces are once again conducting counterattacks, although there has been no official confirmation yet. The Russians are also assaulting Vilna Pole and carrying out shelling. However, over the past day, there have been no changes here, and all attacks are currently being repelled. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are assaulting Malatokmachka, Mali Sherbaki, and Stepove. Shelling also continues non-stop. The Russians have been particularly active in striking near the village of Kamiansk. It's possible that they will attempt to advance in this area soon, but for now, there have been no changes on the front line over the past day. In the Kherson direction, it was reported yesterday that there was one attack on the islands, but the Ukrainian forces successfully repelled it. Currently, only shelling of the right bank is being recorded. There have been no changes over the past day. Meanwhile, While Lavrov claims that Russia is ready for negotiations, President Zelensky stated that the Russians are not ready at all.
The Russians talk a lot about their supposed willingness to agree to American proposals, but so far, there have been no signs that the Russian army is preparing for an actual ceasefire. On the contrary, since Easter, the occupiers have resumed their usual assault activity. Despite suffering significant losses, the Russians are trying to advance, and every day of such battles on the front lines makes it absolutely clear. Russia is trying to deceive the world, to deceive America and others, and to drag out this war even longer. That's why pressure is necessary. Without it, the Russians will not take the steps needed to stop the war. Yesterday's meetings in the Vatican and Rome confirmed that our partners understand what's happening. Ukraine is ready to move as quickly as possible diplomatically. 47 days ago, we agreed to the American proposal for an unconditional ceasefire. Later, we even made our own proposals to the Russians to stop strikes on civilian targets, at the very least. But they responded with shade drones, missiles, artillery, and new assaults. The world must respond properly, with new sanctions and even greater pressure. Of course, it is America that can take the most impactful steps, steps that would truly hurt Russia.
However, as Senator Rubio said yesterday, they are afraid to impose new sanctions against Russia for fear of disrupting the negotiations. As a result, the war continues, and so far, Trump hasn't been able to put a real pressure on Putin. Although Volt stated that the meeting between Trump and Zelensky will go down in history and has great significance. How symbolic this scene is, this meeting. It will go down in history. Trump, as a president of peace, is talking about peace in the Vatican. Before leaving, the president sat with leaders from different faiths, thousands in the crowd. He sought to speak with Zelensky one on one about ending the largest land war in Europe. Both sides must want this. He expressed dissatisfaction with both sides but also determination. 100 days ago, Biden saw no end to the war. It was an endless war, a mid-grinder of people, resources, and national treasuries, where he never defined what victory meant. Trump is decisively using diplomacy to end the war. In 100 days, there have been several rounds of negotiations in Saudi Arabia and the Vatican. It was especially remarkable to stand there with the leaders watching President Trump lead the way. Let's wait to see how events will unfold for them. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.